Okay, so the next step, I think, in this whole Governor Stevens, you got your hand up.
Yeah, but I'll hold. Maybe I'm going to say what I was going
You're
to
gonna
say.
hold what you have to say?
Yeah, until you say what you have to say.
Well, I was gonna turn it over to Executive Director Nevitt to kind of give us a preview of what the next steps are to get this thing finalized and ready possibly. 'Cause right now, we don't have another meeting until September. So unless somebody calls a special meeting, we are, this is gonna be
Well,
in front
wait.
of everybody in September, and that means we're gonna tell the Supreme Court they're just gonna have to wait.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. So, well, my question is, don't we also have a vote on, and if things go bad, here's what we suggest as our preferred alternative? I don't think we've taken that up.
You know, you're right.
That's what I'm. So,
Yeah.
so Mr.
So do you have a motion that
Mr.
you?
President. Well, no, but Mr. President, I'm going to ask again, and I'm just trying to understand Governor Williams-Ruth and his Paul proposal, and if it was only for number 3, and that's the only thing, that's fine. If not, because I think we've heard from Governor Abell that when he gave his presentation, his backup is, and if things go wrong, I'm proposing that this be the break glass in case of emergency proposal. That's the only one we have in front of us. So I'm asking Governor Williams-Ruth if we are to consider at all his proposal, at which point I have certain questions I'd want to ask him, but I just need to know if that's going to be on the table.
Governor Williams-Ruth.
Oops, I don't think my thing came through. I was going to say that if somebody wants to propose it as an answer number 2, then it would be an option. I do not plan to do so.
I've got, did you have another question or comment, Governor Stevens?
No. Well, Mr. President, yes. I would vote for, or I would propose Governor Abell's proposal as our backup.
Governor Abell's proposal. The breakup proposal. Is that okay? You're nodding yes, so I'm going to take that as a yes. Is there a second to Governor Stevens' motion on question number 2 answer?
I'll second it.
Okay, we got a motion and a second to adopt Governor Abell's proposal as to question number 2. Any discussion? Former Governor, past President Shichetti.
Thank you, President Tolleson. We're doing a lot today, which is great. We're getting things done, but we might be moving a little bit too quickly on backup plans. The backup plans are complicated. They can run the gamut from Paul, which may or may not be Governor Williams-Ruth's proposal. They could be similar to what Texas has done, or they could run to what Governor President-elect Abel has proposed. Maybe Plan B, Plan C, and Plan D. Maybe gradations of in between. I would recommend that rather than rush into that today, again, we don't have a special meeting set up. I would say we discuss those at our September meeting. And if not, we don't have the time then the November meeting. We can get back to the court now on, what we've decided. The court, at least from my discussions with the Chief Justice, he did not say that we had to have a deadline on this. I think he would understand that if we put some more thought into this backup plan, that would be beneficial to all of us in the long run. We've got choices here. So I would recommend that we pause here and then talk about this as a separate item in September.
Governor Couch, followed by Nancy Hawkins, followed by our own executive director, followed by Governor Stevens.
Mr. President, I have a point of inquiry before you hear from
Okay.
speakers.
Sure.
Since you meet with Chief Justice Gonzalez weekly, do you have any information that would be more up to date for us on what you think the court is looking for?
So I met with him and I told him what we were going to do today, which, believe it or not, we managed to accomplish about 70% of, which is great. And then he said, well, how do you propose to present this to us? And I said, well, you guys are the boss. What do you want? And that's when he said, well, we'd like to have this combined Board of Governors, Supreme Court, TVW meeting to make your presentation. And originally he didn't tell me that it was going to not be available. Originally he told me 2 days, September 8th, which seemed pretty fast, and then September 20th. And then later on from his judicial assistant, I got an email saying September 20th is off the table because they've got some sort of en banc deal going or something like that. So, okay, so that means September 8th. And then I think I fired back, you got any alternative dates? Because in my discussions with the executive director, I got the impression that we're not going to be ready by September 8th. So, and so she's going to poll the justices and get some alternate dates in September and October. So, actually we could end up making a presentation to the Supreme Court TVW-wise in October, which is fine by me. I'll be doing a lot less talking than that. So that's where we are. That's the latest I have. I got another meeting scheduled with him whenever we set it up. We have these usually weekly, but sometimes because of people's vacation schedules, etc., they don't happen. So I don't know if I have a meeting next week with him or not. I have to double check my calendar. I don't have that in front of me. So that's where that is. So can I get back to the listing here? Former President Shakedi, do you have your hand up? Did I see that? Did I miss you?
I do not.
Okay. Governor Couch, followed by Nancy Hawkins.
I had planned to speak on behalf of Paul as an alternative because I think that's a really interesting idea, and I think if we have to look at alternatives, but given what we've just been reported from President Tollefson on timelines, I think an alternative is an interesting question because an alternative should be based on is it an alternative question of what do we do if there's legislation that forces us to take action, or is it if this isn't the best idea, if our answer to question 3 was different, what do we think the backup, what is the second best structure of a bar association? To that answer, I think Paul might be the answer. It's a little unclear as to what question 2 is really asking us because it seems like it was dependent on question 1 with the litigation and question 3. Now question 2 is in a murky area because the litigation doesn't affect us, but it may in the future. And we've decided that keeping the current structure is the best option. So the backup plan is odd. And I fully support the idea of continuing this conversation, maybe researching a couple proposals on that and trying to get something done in September. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're up to Nancy Hawkins.
Thank you.
You're kind of fading in. You're fading in and out.
Sorry. Is
There
that
you go.
better?
That's
Okay.
much better.
I'll use my court voice, my domineering court voice. I think it would be confusing, inappropriate, and unjustified. I'd probably come up with a couple other descriptors to use as a backup plan concepts that were just rejected by significant votes. I think that a backup plan has to be either we wait and see if a court case comes down and specifically applies to Washington, and then a new plan, new structure is, or structure changes are implemented based on what the rulings are in that case. Anything else is saying that the vote we just heard, which was, I think it was 10-2, is meaningless. It's to say, oh yeah, the board voted to maintain its existing structure, but they also said, but we can live with something else that's completely different structure. And it's a backup plan, sort of whether it's forced upon us or not. So I don't see any reason why the answer shouldn't be conveyed to the Supreme Court that any backup plan would have to be prepared at the time based on a case that comes down directly affecting Washington State Bar, not similar speculation of the last 10, 15 years, and not some plan that either died for lack of a second or was significantly voted down. And I'm sorry, I think it was, well, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We have our executive director.
Thank you. I wanted to provide a substantive comment on my opinion on this. I've been thinking about it quite a bit since the board's last discussion. I tend to think that question 2 is not asking what we think the second best structure is. I think it's asking, what do we think? I think it's sort of it follows on question 1, and question 1 is, are we required by law to change our structure? And then I see question 2 as asking, you know, if not now, if we do become required, you know, then what should be the contingency plan? I have been persuaded that when and if we are required, we don't know what that will look like. And so it seems like to have a substantive plan at this point does not make sense. However, I'm also persuaded by some of the comments from the last meeting that having put some thought into how much time it might take to have a structural change, what some of the steps might be, I think that would be useful. I also think it would be useful, you know, in light of some of the comments Ms. Hawkins just made and some concerns I've had, that perhaps the contingency plan could address, at least in an advisory way, when we would take up this issue again, because I do have a concern that every year there could be a proposal that we relook at the structure. And I think, and while I don't think that this would be binding on a future board, I think some advice to a future board about under what circumstances should we retake up this discussion and what should that process look like? I personally think that would be valuable guidance, because I don't think that these questions will go away. So those are my comments.
Okay, I have Governor Stevens, followed by Governor Boyd, followed by Governor Williams-Ruth.
So, one, I want to thank everybody for the comments that they've made. I thought about this a bit more. And so I'm going to actually withdraw my motion at this time and let it take its own general course without trying to shoehorn something today.
See, this was a second, I think, by Governor Higginson. Yes?
No,
That
Governor.
might be and I don't I agree. I want to vote on this. Thanks.
So you're supporting the motion, the withdrawal?
No, I'm not.
Oh. Okay, so we have to vote on,
I guess point of order, 'cause I'm wondering how this works with the main mover wanting to withdraw and the seconder not.
well, let's
question.
let our parliamentarian share with us. I think he's already answered this once, but go ahead.
Since there is not a unanimous decision to withdraw it, the motion continues unless there is a motion to basically table the pending motion.
You know what? It's fine. I'll switch. That's fine. A withdraw. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, so does anybody object to the withdrawal of the motion? That requires, if anybody objects, then we got to go through the vote to get it off the body's consideration. Anybody object? You gotta have to just turn on your mic and say, I object, if you object. All right, so the motion is withdrawn. I don't know if any of the people that have their hands up are planning on talking about other issues. If that's the case, go ahead and I'll just go down the list. I think I've got Governor Stevens, followed by Governor Boyd, followed by Governor Williams-Ruth. Oh, you're putting your hand down, Governor Stevens? Is that what I'm seeing?
Yes, what I wanted to do has been done. It's been withdrawn.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you, Governor Stevens. I'm sorry, Governor Williams-Ruth.
Thank you. I just want to comment on Director Nevitt's idea, and I have to slightly disagree. I think that regardless of what we do, if the executive committee or 5 governors want to put something on the agenda, then that is what'll control, regardless of if there's a motion or something that says we're not going to address this again. I don't think we can do any, and again, I could be wrong, but I think that the rules and the procedure for how agendas are made are laid out. And I mean, because again, technically we weren't supposed to talk about COVID policy until after the Supreme Court acted, but yet we had discussion at our July meeting. So, you know, because that was the will of the board, regardless of the policy. So I don't know that it would be an appropriate restriction and restraint on the actions of future governors and boards if to say that would carry anything. So I would, for lack of putting the general counsel on a spot, I would think that we should have that question looked at to see what the efficacy and bindingness is of those types of actions, because that's part of my concern is we will be continuing to face this issue. I mean, it was 2018, it was 2013, it was before that. This is going to be the merry-go-round that keeps coming around.
So got Governor Boyd followed by Governor Pertzer.
Oh, thank you. I didn't really mean to lower my hand earlier, but then Executive Director Nevitt said exactly what I was thinking. But I know it's not particularly helpful when somebody says something and then everybody sits silently, because then there's no notion about how many people agree or disagree. So I just thought I would speak up to voice my support for Executive Director Nevitt's comments.
Thank you. Governor Pertzer.
Yes, thank you. I want to kind of maybe expand on what Governor Williams-Ruth said. I agree that this is something that's going to be, considered from here on, but I think that's the whole issue. And that's why I don't think making a finite plan right now really makes a tremendous amount of sense, because one, we don't know what the landscape is currently. And if we don't know what the landscape is currently, making a finite plan at this point in time or a backup plan really doesn't make a lot of sense. These things, the law is dynamic, it's not static, and this is going to be dynamic. And so I think we respond as we get more information as decided by courts, or if we can come to a consensus as to what is the appropriate framework. But just putting a plan out there to have a plan out there to appease the Supreme Court makes zero sense to me. I mean, that's disingenuous in the first place. And, you know, we need to be honest with them and say, look, we don't have the idea what the perfect plan is going to be. We're going to continue to work on it. But to make a decision now when we don't know what the landscape is not prudent. And so I think we continue to work on it as Director Nevitt suggested, and not bury our heads in the sand and don't, you know, go home with our feelings hurt because our particular proposal wasn't accepted. You know, this is a situation that's going to continue on working through, and we need to continue working on it.
Okay, thanks. We have Chair Michael Cherry.
While I agree that I don't think it's the time to build a plan, I don't think it would hurt were the Board of Governors and the executive staff to put together a checklist, if you will, of matters that would have to be decided so that at least the scope of a plan is in place. Disaster recovery planning, something I've done on the technology side. And if you start with a blank piece of paper when the emergency's underway, then you have problems. So please at least consider making a list of decisions that would have to be made and maybe the time it would take to make those so that the court has some guidance. And if I may, I don't mean to really make a commercial. If you really want to see something about this in sort of a post-examination, I recommend that you check it out, Apple TV's 5 Days of Memorial. It's a documentary about the Katrina flood and the damage it did to Memorial Hospital in New Orleans, which had a plan for hurricanes, but did not have a plan for a flood. And if you think about Katrina was two events. It was a hurricane, which the hospital survived, and then the flood that it did not survive. And it as lawyers, you'll find it interesting. So with that, I'll stop my endorsement of other TV shows, but recommend that you do think about having at least a checklist in place so that the court understands the scope of work that would have to be done in a backup situation.
Thank you very much. Anybody else have any questions, thoughts, or comments? I'm going to turn this back over to Executive Director Nevitt because we still have work to do. We're not. Now comes the hard part of trying to put something to paper. We've had people volunteer. I'm just wondering if the people who succeeded on question 3 would be willing to work with the executive director and our staff to kind of finalize that report that we need to. And I'm looking to the executive director to kind of give us some guidelines for time because I don't want this thing dropped on the board September 19th. I mean, they've got to have at least, I'm thinking, a month. Now, maybe not a month, but at least a good 3 weeks to digest the report and make sure they're all good with it before we have to, yay or nay in September, unless we call a special meeting, which right now nobody's jumping up or down to do.
So my thoughts are, I do think it's highly unlikely we're going to get a quorum before the end of August. I think there's just too many competing priorities. Some people have no flexibility on the weekends. Some people only have flexibility on the weekends. I don't think it's realistic unless people are really committed to moving things around. So I think, I have my team is on deck and on hand to prepare a report that reflects the decisions of the board. So we can do that. If the board wants to assign folks to work with us, we can do that. We can also send it out to the board for comment before the meeting materials go out. I mean, we can do it as soon as it's done so that, and those would not, the comments of individual governors wouldn't necessarily be, I think our job is to try to make sure that the report reflects what the board decided here today. And I think our approach would be to really keep the report very limited to this was the process and this was the decision. Because I think if we go much beyond that, we're going to run into a lot of disagreement around the content of the report. If the board wants to review and if the board wants to approve that in September, then obviously we'll need to work with the court to find a later date. I think a few other things the board should consider is, so to question 2, I think the board should consider whether, because I've heard a few different things, whether the board wants to, I mean, we could just sort of leave that out altogether, but I think you may want to give the court some sense of where you landed on that. So you may want to say, you know, we decided that it didn't make sense to make a contingency plan because we don't know what the ultimate decision will be. Or you could say, we've directed the staff to create the outline, you know, a check, something along what Chair Cherry suggested. So I do think maybe there should be some motion as to how to respond to question 2. So I guess those are sort of my thoughts about what's next and what's left.
Anybody have any thoughts? Governor Stevens, you got your hand up again? I know we got Governor.
Yes, I do.
Okay, Governor Stevens, then Governor Williams-Ruth.
So I actually believe it is a matter in terms of number 2. Maybe we have to vote on this, but that our real view is we need to have the actual case come down for us to actually do the planning of the next steps. And we can reflect that we have 2 other proposals, and I think both the proposals, meaning Paul and Governor Abell's proposal, as well as I think the great work that was done by Kevin Platchey and crew in just giving the range of different things that one might do, as here are all the things we have looked at, and we will hold those as places where we can start from. But what we actually will need is the real case that directs us on what we need to do, and without going further than that, because I do believe that's been a key part of the conversation, which was, you know, not to get into trying to respond to something where we really don't know what the call is going to be, what the answer is going to be, what the direction is going to be from the court, and leave it at that. And maybe if you heard all of that, maybe I can turn that into a motion, but that would be the direction I would give in terms of how to respond to item number 2.
Governor Williams-Ruth.
I guess that's really.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you.
That's really a rightness response. It is not right yet for us to actually go down the path of what to do with number 2, because we really need to hear from the court on what to do with number 2.
Okay, thanks so much, Governor Stevens. Governor Williams-Ruth.
Yeah, it makes my teeth itch to agree, but I agree. We really, I mean, the board seems to have spoken, and I would think that the answer to number 2 should be that to be most effective in time, cost, and making sure that anything compelled is done in accordance with what the actual case would be, that our answer is to wait until such time as a case directly being, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like that directly impacts Washington comes our way. And it may, who knows, it may come sooner than later. But I think that is where there's no reason to spend more staff time going down in hypotheticals trying to create when my read of this board is that no one really wants to have that kind of backup plan. So that way there's no fear of being wrong, because that's what we got with GR 12.2. They tried to do something in advance of the Keller decision, and it ended up not lining up with what the Supreme Court ultimately came down with.
Thank you, Governor Williams-Ruth. I think we have Past President Shichetti up next.
Yes, thank you, President Tolson. Just briefly, the bear closest to us is a Crow decision. The Crow, what's going on in the Ninth Circuit. And I think you can get a pretty good idea of what the issues are from that series of pleadings and issues. Enough to at least get us discussing the topic. I agree with Governor Williams-Ruth. We may not want to put anything in stone for fear of missing the mark, but that should not dissuade us from at least looking into the issue and having a plan B or a plan C that we might need to pivot on at a later point, because I think we've got a good notion of what those three judge panel in the Crow decision talked about, and it sets at least guidelines for what we might need to address. So I like the idea of having a process. I like the idea of having maybe a checklist, at least something that we can hit the ground running if we need to on short notice.
Governor Stevens, you have your hand back up? Or is it just?
Yeah, well, yes, Mr. President. So I just heard what past President Shichetti had to say. And so I need you to go a little bit farther. So what should we do next and when should we do it?
Are you asking me, Governor Stevens?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
I think we should start having those discussions in September. I think we should tell the court that if we've made a motion now, we think in the best interest of the organization is to have the mandatory bar. Do we need a plan B? Should we have a plan B? I think the answer to that is yes. And I think we should start talking about that in September and perhaps even discontinue it in November. I think the response to the Supreme Court that says, yes, we think it's important and we should talk about it, I think would be well received by the court.
We got President-elect Clark, Governor Couch, Nancy Hawkins.
Thanks, Brian. So I had asked at the last one that we have staff come back with some sort of ideas with this. I mean, what to? I still think that makes sense, and I really personally hope that we wrap this up by next month, because I would like us to get on to things, for next year that this I know is important, but I think until Crow gets, I'm done, yeah. So thank you.
Thank you, Governor Clark. Governor Couch, followed by Nancy Hawkins.
Thank you. So as I'm thinking about this, how we build contingency plans, that sort of thing, it seems like that's what we've been doing over the last 8 meetings, is researching this, investigating this, doing the work that, will need to be done if we have to have a contingency plan. And so to me, it makes sense to maybe tell the courts that our backup plan is to take all of the materials we have done already, take all of the work we've done already, have it saved in a file, and pull it out and figure out, based on the current events that force us to go to our contingency, pull from that to draw what the best solution is. Because we have this information. We talk about going back and doing research and having the staff look into opportunities. We've done that. That's what happened. And so, I think really at this point in time, we can tell the courts that we've done the work. Our contingency plan is to use the materials we've gathered over these 8 meetings and apply them to the specific circumstances that cause us to go to our backup plan. Thanks.
Thank you, Governor Couch. Nancy Hawkins, Brett Williams-Ruth.
Yeah, I think that executive director's idea, but having a timeline and a list of issues to an estimated timeline, should something come out against the Washington bar, and having a list of the questions that need to be addressed, such as who gets what money, who gets what staff, who gets what contracts. Those are all steps to be decided, not steps to be discussed in October or November. That implies that the decision to maintain an existing bar structure is not certain. In fact, the vote is overwhelming. So one, we have to say that we can't make another plan until and unless there's a case that directs us. But here are issues that will need to be resolved or might come up depending on what the case law is. I've got no problem with Jordan's suggestion that the minutes all be kept in one place and available for future discussion, but not to keep going with this endless development of a backup plan, because what it really looks like is just a substitute plan to substitute for the existing structure for no reason. It continues an existing discussion now that's been going on for months. And that does not benefit an organization that has substantive issues that it needs to address. And if anything, it just continues a lot of bad feelings and behind the scene emails that the rest of us don't see, behind the scene meetings. Let's have a break from this. All we were asked to do as an organization, all you were asked to do as a board was to answer some simple questions. Maybe not so simple, but you weren't asked to give 100 answers to 100 questions. You stick it back in the Supreme Court's lap. Let's see what they have to say. If they say, okay, keep on talking, I guess the organization can keep on talking, but they're the ones that brought this up. Finish the questions as the minimum necessary, and send it to them, and let's see what happens. That lets the Board of Governors, the sections, everybody get back on track doing substantive work. And I would just add one more thing in terms of this, I guess it was called the Powell proposal. There was no discussion about it today. There were some questions. It was withdrawn or failed to get a second or whatever. It certainly can't be addressed as a potential backup plan when there's no analysis of it that has occurred in any kind of detail.
There we go. Does that mean you're finished? Thank you. Governor Williams-Ruth, there you are.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to propose a motion to answer in question 2, in that the Board of Governors, that there are currently cases pending in both the Ninth Circuit and the United States Supreme Court, and that the Board of Governors will continue to closely follow the cases and issues and will work to develop a plan as necessary and as needed.
That's your motion.
Yes.
Is there a second? Do we still have quorum for that matter?
Can you say the motion again, please? Sorry.
Basically, just telling the court that that there's cases pending in the Ninth Circuit and the Supreme Court, and if it ever becomes necessary or needed, we'll look at it again then.
Could you take these friendly amendments to state that that the process we have engaged in, we have gathered proposals and comments from different parts of the state that we can use to make decisions, just like Jordan stated earlier, in addition to what you said?
Sure.
Okay, so I will second that motion.
Now that the motion's been seconded, do you want to speak to it, Governor Williams-Ruth?
No, again, it's just saying that, again, we recognize and acknowledge the fact that this is not over. And again, the Federalist Society has done an amazing job working with the Republican Party to pack the court. Just as a reminder, the majority of the Ninth Circuit is now Trump appointee justices or judges. So this issue is not done. We're seeing where it's going, and this will come back. But I believe that we are all ready to just basically say, until such time as a case directly impacts us, we're going to just keep our head in the sand. So I think that's where I'm taking the comments to be. Again, if this doesn't pass and people want to work on proposals, okay. But I think that we're ready to be done.
Governor-elect Fay, followed by Governor Adwale.
Thank you for unmuting me. I can't vote, but I'll second the emotion. We could very quickly come with a checklist or process, but a court is going to come down with a decision that's going to tell the bar that it either has to stop doing something or jettison, certain activities. We don't know what those activities would be. The Powell proposal is based on the assumption that what is prohibited would be legislative activity, but it could be other things. We could come up with a checklist of what's the issue, what did come off, what are we going to do, but we really are not in a position to figure out, okay, we're going to do this to the office lease. We just don't know. We don't know whether the law of gravity will apply or not. Thank you.
Director Platsky, followed by Governor Adwale.
Thank you, President Tolleson. I was just going to point out that part of the process we went through is developing a host of scenarios. They went all the way from status quo to certain points of what would happen if we had to take certain measures. So I think we've done some of the work. I mean, it's in the materials that we've had the board look at in all of the scenarios that we did a substantial amount of work in developing and going over. So I think the work we've done could answer some of the potential fine or orders or rulings that come out of future cases. So I think it's safe to say that some of that work has been done already.
Okay. Mr. President, am I recognized?
Yeah, you're up next, followed by past President Shikhedi.
Okay, I just want to, I adopt the two statements made by the two Kevins. Thank you. I can't wait for Governor Kevin and Director Kevin to see you guys, to give you a hug. Thank you so much. I just wanted us to note that particular statement, that the work that has been done already, and I'm grateful to Governor Williams-Root for allowing us to include that in his motion, save for the head in the sand comment, which I think it didn't meant to be disparaging, and I trust his heart that was not the intent to disparage anyone. So please vote for this motion that include the fact that we are going to consider all the materials and all the statements made by all the sittings that we have done while we wait for the decision to come down. So I urge everyone to vote yes on this motion. Thank you.
We've got, well, let's see. Former president shaking his head. No, he's not talking. Okay. Well, we have Governor Boyd.
Oh, thank you. I'm not sure that I'm ready to vote on this yet, only because I think it would be very prudent for us to also have a proposed timeline on when we would have a new plan in place. So if there was some sort of adverse court ruling that affected the structure of our bar, I think that it would be advantageous for us to then be able to go back to the court and say, okay, well, based on the analysis that we've done of all these different options, we need, 6 months, or we need 18 months, or 36 months to be able to implement all of this. I think we're going to have more success if we're forced to change, if we can give a definitive, somewhat definitive timeline, than if we don't have that answer. So I don't think ready to vote on number 2 yet, because I do think it would be prudent to include that in the plan. Thank you.
I think we have Governor Pertzer up next.
Yes, thank you. And I agree with Governor Boyd about waiting. The only potential binding authority, and I say potential, is the Crow decision, which is in the district court. And so there is absolutely no urgency at this point in time to put any type of a plan with specificity down, because we have no idea what's going to go on. But keeping an eye on the Crow case and see what happens there, you got a better idea what's going on. So it makes no sense just to go and spin our wheels and make a plan when we have no idea what that plan is going to entail. So keeping a watch over the Crow cases as it matriculates to the court system, which are glacially slow, gives us ample time to put something together. So I think, let's not get ahead of ourselves, and let's see what's going to go on.
Any other comments or thoughts? We do have a motion before us, right? So unless people have other comments or thoughts, we're going to have our executive director read back the motion and then do another vote.
The motion is to answer question 2, that there are currently cases pending in the Ninth Circuit and the U.S. Supreme Court, and the board will continue to follow the cases and will work to develop a plan as necessary and needed, and that the board has engaged, and that the process the board has engaged in has gathered comments from different parts of the state that can be drawn upon in developing a plan.
Everybody have the motion in mind? Do we have quorum still, executive director? Sure hope so.
It's hard to tell because, not everyone has their cameras on. I would suggest, if you want, you could start with the roll call, but you could just do the vote and that'll
I'll do the vote and see if I got enough. I know that Governor Higginson had to leave. I don't believe Governor Bell is with us any longer. So we've lost 2 there for sure. Well, let's just see where we go. If we don't have enough, we don't have enough, and that'll be the end of that. Okay, Governor Bell, expect an answer. Governor Adewale.
Aye.
Governor Angel Bell.
Aye.
Governor Boyd.
No.
Governor Clark.
Aye.
Governor Couch.
Aye.
Governor Dresden.
Aye.
Governor Higginson. Governor McBride. Governor Peterson. Governor Pertzer.
Aye.
Governor Siani. Governor Stevens.
Aye.
Governor Williams-Ruth.
Aye.
Okay, what I've got is 8 yeses, 2 noes, and 5 not voting. Is that what you have, Executive Director Nevitt?
Yes.
So we did have quorum. The motion carries.